This is Linn Rivers, an expert in functional medicine and holistic healing, whose life mission is to help others overcome illnesses and transform their lives from within. Linn's wisdom encourages us to invest in ourselves, and our conversation serves as a powerful reminder that time is unforgiving. And if you want to be somewhere better in 5 years, be mindful of your actions today. As we know, they will create the reality of your tomorrow. So if you're looking to make those changes yourself, I invite you to flip the lid with Linn as we dive into personal growth and mindful living. Enjoy. Welcome back, everybody, to Flipping the Lid. You know what we do here by now, and we always jump into the real, raw stories with just incredible individuals. Now, today, we have been attempting to get this interview done for a little while, and we just have had tech issues and getting things fried, and it's just really funny because this is an incredible human who I have no doubt is going to be able to go to all the places that are going to give value to you. She is a functional health and wellness expert and educator, but she's somebody that honestly just lives a really cool life in how she views health, integrative health, and helping people ultimately bring everything back into their own power and control with their mind, their body, their spirit, and all of the components that are necessary. She's got an unbelievable story, and she's also a prophetic dreamer, which I love, and we're going to dive into. But she's somebody who's going to bring the truth, the real, the raw, and she's going to do it in a way that's going to make sure that you get to move as a result of it. Linn, I'm so excited to have you here today.
I'm so excited to be here, finally.
Well, the only question that I ask everybody on this show is, who are you in your words?
Who am I in I'm me. I think that's like the best thing I could say is I'm me. Like I've grown into the best version of myself, and that's who I am.
So who are you then? Right? Give us a little feel for like who you are in this human meat suit and how you show up in the world, and less about what you do. But I love the answer. So I'm not challenging the answer because you are you and you're clear on you, but no, we don't know who you are. So I want to hear it from your words.
Yeah. So I am a very conscious, self-aware being who's always trying to evolve in my life, right? What is it that I want from this life? How do I get to the places that I want to be? And I'm always asking those deeper questions for myself. What other people do, not my business. What I do for myself, that's me, right? And so I'm always learning new things about myself, what it is that I want out of life and the people who I want in my life, and what do I see myself doing in 5 years? And so that incorporates everything from the way that I think, the things that I eat, how I eat, the things I do. I'm really just conscious about everything that I do. And a lot of people could actually get torn up about that because it can be really overwhelming to be so self-analytical. But there's just no other way for me to live my life because I was put on a journey where I had to learn these things. I had to grow and evolve in really fast ways that a lot of people don't ever have to. And so I'm just always taking one step at a time, finding the flow of life and seeing where it takes me, but also taking really big steps when I feel that it's time to do so.
No, I love how you answered that question because all of that is who you are. That is you. That is me, as you say it. And I love that. To be consciously aware and to raise your level of awareness and intention in so many areas, it is a relatively unique thing, particularly to have done it as early in life as you did. I identify with a lot of what you said because there's often people that are always like, Brian, you're always working on yourself. You're always intentional with everything. And it's like, yeah, because I wasn't in so many other areas. And as a result, I paid for it. Mm-hmm. You highlighted that as well. And you said, I went on this journey that kind of forced me down this path. Take us there. Where did this journey begin? And when did you become aware of it so that you could start to harness what you now know?
Absolutely. I mean, it started pretty much the beginning of my life. I had pneumonia when I was 1 in 3 as a baby. And a lot of people don't think of trauma starting that early in life because we're not aware of it. But the reality is we take on what our parents are feeling at that time, right? So we may not understand words, but we understand feelings. And since I'm almost dying and I'm in incubators at that time, my family, the way that they would say, I love you, came out in fear. So very early on in life, I feared love. The one thing that we should embrace, I feared it. And so I started off my journey, when I was 4 and 5, I can still remember being terrified of the word love. And every time my family would say it, it would trigger a response inside of me that thought of death, right? And so I would never say the word love, and I was terrified of it. And the first time I actually ever used the word to say I love you to a family member was when I was 8. And my grandma, who was my favorite person, she was the only stable figure in my life at that time. I said, I love you. And she took her last breath right after I said it. And as an 8-year-old, we have extremely narcissistic brains that think that everything either happens to us or because of us. So I thought I killed her.
Mm-hmm.
And so I stuffed that so deep, and that actually grew. And I didn't end up saying I love you till I was probably about 28 years old, when my grandpa, who was the last person left in my family, he was in the hospital. And I was like, wow, like that was the moment that I realized I have to work through this, and I need him to know that I love him, because if he dies, I'd rather him know that I love him instead of not saying it. Like when I was 15 and my mom died, I didn't say I love you. I thought it would kill her quicker. Right. And so I was working through all of these different traumatic episodes from all of my family members dying very early on in life. And I was chronically ill the majority of my teens and into my 20s. And I lost my partner, the same colon cancer that my mom did. And so all of these things just kind of culminated until I had my own near-death experience. And it was when I woke up in the hospital and I thought, oh my God, like I chose to stay here. So I need to wake up and put both feet on the ground and do something about this. Like I can't keep living in fear, and I can't keep attracting people who leave. You know, it was an abandonment wound that I kept replaying over and over. And so it was that moment where I was like, it's time to be here. And I took an entire year off, and I did nothing but climbed and paddleboarded and did all these things that made me feel alive, because I was surrounded by so much death for so long that I was just sucked into that world. Right. And I didn't know how to live. And so that was the moment though for me where everything really shook me and was like, okay, Lynn, like, what are you going to do with your life? Are you going to stay here and keep doing the same thing over and over again? Or are you going to try something new and live a life that you actually love?
Yeah. There's a lot in that answer, and I really appreciate how you went about navigating that whole dialogue. You know, I agree. There's so many people that don't really understand the full impacts of trauma on people as young as you experienced, right? And at the end of the day, what we also know now is that trauma actually gets passed down in our DNA. Mm-hmm. So it's to what you had said, you're also absorbing the energy and the emotion from everybody around you that you're aware of at that stage. But whatever they were all carrying as a result of it also is compounding on top of that. It is something that a lot of people don't quite understand, but you did highlight one of the more core elements of how we all come into this world, and we all want to feel safe. We all want to feel protected. We all want to feel seen and understood, and we all want to feel connected. Right. And genetically, almost at a granular level, we desire this thing we call love to not only be there and exist between those that brought us into this world, but with anybody who is caring for us and taking care of us, right? To keep us protected and safe. For you to realize that you were afraid of love, when did that become consciously aware for you? I know that you didn't say I love you until 8. But when did you realize the connecting points to the pneumonia between 1 and 3 and what you were absorbing and how you created that association? Because to get to the source like you did is phenomenal. So give us a little understanding as to how you found it.
Yeah, like I said, it wasn't until my grandpa was in the hospital and he was the last person left. And I had to look at it, and I felt oh my God, I can still feel the feeling of the fear of saying I love you. I was like, there is so much fear here. What am I afraid of? And I realized like he could die in this moment, or he might not. We all have that, we don't know. And I either have the choice to make sure he knows that I love him just in case he dies, or I don't tell him and then I regret it again. And then I just continue this pattern. And it was in that moment that I felt everything. And I actually allowed myself to feel it. I allowed myself to feel that fear and to be in that pain, that discomfort, and to go back and see why I had that, right? It wasn't just from being sick as a child. There was a lot of other things that compounded upon that when I was younger. And so it was just that moment of, I need to work through this. And I said, I love you. And when he said it back, it was the first time that we ever had that. And it was the most beautiful moment for me because there it is, the last person in my family before he actually died. and I got to say I love you. And it was
Yeah.
just one of the most beautiful releases, but it really did so much more than open that door,
Hmm.
because it made me realize how many times I had been in relationships and I'd say I love you because I didn't mean it. And it was like that moment where I actually did, for the first time in my life, end up falling in love with someone who died a year later.
Yep.
But it was the first time that I realized I'm afraid to say I love you because I know it's real,
Yeah.
right? Because everyone else is like, sure, I'll say I love you. It doesn't matter. And so it opened up a whole can of worms for me. But around mid-20s is when I was actually like, okay, like it's time to work through this. It took me
Yeah.
that long, from
Yeah.
being a child to mid-20s.
Well, I mean, I would tell you that mid-20s is still early, given what I know is the case for many people, which, don't unpack until they're in their 50s,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
All the stuff from their entire lives that have continued to show up. And so, but what you talk about there is you gave yourself the ability to actually feel, right? I've said for a long time, if we don't feel, we don't heal. Right.
Mhm.
And they've actually shown us that with science as well, that if we don't actually allow ourselves to embody the associated emotions, it just becomes intellectual and we don't move there. But we
Right.
can transport ourselves to resonant memories, even by using and allowing our bodies to point us towards those because of the cellular memory that's created. And that's what you talked about. Now, to your point, and you kind of like subtly said it, you also even joked about it in this last kind of answer, right? You had a lot of loss in your life as well.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And you have a lot of moments that you're not able to get back. And I would suggest that saying I love you to your grandma and then her taking her last breath is a trauma in and of itself.
Mhm.
Right. There's a huge embedded element of how that can impact you. Not being able to say I love you to your mom before she's gone.
Mhm.
Right. One of the first people that you're really loving as a partner passes away a year later. Right. Like all of these pieces. And so you kind of became an expert in navigating loss to a degree as well. Give us some insight into maybe some of the earlier stages of how you navigated loss and how that evolved over time as it happened more frequently for you.
You know what, Brian? This is actually really funny because on my drive home today, I was thinking about the fact that I went through a lot of loss, and it is one of my greatest gifts because a lot of people don't know how to be alone. I had to learn how to be alone in really deep and profound ways. Aside from the fact that, yes, all of my family has died and I lost a partner and I haven't been in a relationship for that big of 7+ years. It's also the fact that I learned to love to be alone. And that is really difficult for people. And so for me to navigate that, I think that was a big process that I really had to understand from so many different levels of what it means to be self-sufficient. It's not about paying rent or all these things, but it's about genuinely falling in love with yourself enough to be in your own presence and be totally comfortable and being okay with having these difficult conversations with yourself. Like, I remember going on a date before and I said something, and this woman was like, how do you pick these things out yourself? My counselor would have to take months to get this out of me. And it hit me at that moment to think like, oh, wow, like people don't spend enough time alone to where they have these conversations with themselves. And I work it over and over until I actually understand it. And I was just driving home today. I was like, that is my gift. A lot of other people learned things that it took me way longer to learn, just like simple things about being a human. But I learned through all of these deaths in my life how to, one, yes, again, be alone, but two, the beauty of death and everything that came with it, because I have gotten to connect with my family members since they've left. I've had moments where I was like, oh, there they are, and yes, one way is through dreams, but I've also had some really profound experiences in the physical with them showing themselves to me. And in ways, if you want to talk about, we can. But for me, that was this beauty of, oh my God, death is such a gift. We are supposed to be here while we're here, but leaving is also not a problem. And for me to be okay with that, that's just another part of that where, yes, I lost all these people, but I also had my own near-death experiences that really showed me this profound beauty of, oh my God, it's okay to go.
Yeah.
It's okay to go, but they don't want me to go yet.
Yeah. It's interesting because I have often said as well that I know what it's like to be the only one in most rooms. right? And I'm the only one that has the experiences that I've had with my arm. It's obvious, it stands out, right? There's other people who identify with being the only one in the room for a whole variety of reasons. But what's also interesting is many people can be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone. Right. And I have found that the more I've done this work, the more I've learned to love myself, that I can, be alone and never be lonely.
Exactly.
Right. It is a complete, profound shift. But what you also hit on there, and I'm happy that you even said it in the way that you did, because as you were talking, yes, loss is one component that gave you a healthy relationship with mortality, but so did your own near-death experiences. So I do want to come full circle to what you said we could talk about in terms of the physical representations and dreams. But what I want to start with, if it's okay, is give us a little insight into what your near-death experience or experiences were. You kind of subtly embedded it in your answer as it was related to all the love conversations that were taking place and it being a catalyst for driving you. But help us understand what happened to you and how did that particular experience start to shape you?
Yeah. So the first one was actually at the same time that my partner was diagnosed with colon cancer. And so we were both, it was so beautiful. I mean, to this day, I'm still just like baffled by our abilities at that time. And she had to go home and live with her family because I couldn't take care of her. I had to actually choose myself in that moment. And I think that was one of the biggest things that we came together for, was I was always so much about helping other people. But there I was going through my own healing challenge, and I couldn't help her. So I was left alone and having to figure out my own stuff. And, with my functional health background, I was like, okay, I'm going to get through this. And I got to the point where, before I was able to do that, obviously, I was lying in bed and I was thinking, I need to go drink water. I need water. And it took me 15 to 20 minutes to get like 10 feet. And I kept passing out along the way. And at the time, my dogs weren't allowed in my bedroom, right? But I finally make it back to my bed and I lay down and they come and they lay right beside me. And I was like, they can feel it. They can feel me. And all of a sudden, I have the most beautiful sense of peace wash over me that I could never explain. It's nothing that you're ever going to feel in this physical reality. And all of a sudden, I feel like it's okay to go. Like it's okay to let go. And the only reason I had ever been afraid of letting go was because of my dogs. Like who was going to find them? Who was going to know about them? I was alone. And so they were the reason that I kept going. And so I'm laying in bed and all of a sudden I'm just like, they'll be okay. Like they'll be taken care of. It's going to be okay. And I let go. And sure enough, I have this guide come rushing in on a horse. It was a Native American guide, which is a whole nother story because I had always been connected to Native American cultures and I couldn't figure out why. And sure enough, this guide comes rushing in. He's like, you can't come yet. This is what you have to do. And he told me exactly what I needed to do. They do this, it was like this pushback kind of a thing. And all of a sudden, I'm back in my bed and my body's not in pain. And they told me you're going to have enough energy to get up and you need to go do X, Y, Z. And so I get up and for the first time, I'm able to walk to the bathroom in probably 3 months without pain, without having to fall to the ground. And I get there and I do everything and I'm on my healing journey and I start getting better and things are great for a little bit until I find out that my partner died and nobody told me. Oh. And yeah, so that was a whole nother
hit. Yeah.
And so my health retracted and things kind of reversed. And then I ended up with a ruptured appendix at the same time that my dad died. And so I was just like, ooh, this is a lot, right? And I ended up in the hospital because my appendix had ruptured to the point where I had peritonitis. And so they had me in the hospital for a week. And my doctor did not think I was going to make it. He was almost certain. I was like, well, we'll see. And so I slip back into that space and I find that sense of peace that came to me again. And I hear someone telling me, you're going to be okay. Allow yourself to have the surgery. You're going to stay. And when I go into the surgery room, I noticed that all of the people around me were angels and they are called earth angels. And they showed me certain people come into your life for a very split second, and these are angels to you. And it was, I can't even tell you, I wasn't on drugs or anything at that point. And I was just I have chills because the peace that came from that moment when I was deathly ill, about to die, about to go into surgery, and I was so happy. I was so happy. And then that's when I came back, and that was the time where I realized, like, oh, I decided to stay here. It's time to it's time to live. Like, I need to stop, 1 foot out the door, because I was doing that since I was 1 year old.
Yeah.
And so those are my two big, the really pivotal near-death experiences that kind of just shaped me.
Yeah, I mean, those are huge. And obviously they came alongside a whole variety of other things too, right? I mean, loss of your dad, loss of your partner, like all of it's happening. It seems like whenever you get hit twice. And that just seems like your lot in some cases. You certainly have had a lot of back-to-back elements, but my dear, you also have a variety of really profound gifts. And I say that through both conditioning and what you've had to learn, but also some really natural abilities to learn to listen to yourself in different ways earlier, right? You identify as a prophetic dreamer. You have talked more than once around, talking to some of your loved ones in different periods, physically and not physically. You've referenced multiple areas where you've heard voices and your subconscious mind is communicating with you in a variety of ways. You learn to tune and condition and really be able to listen into some of these channels throughout the course of your life. Maybe give some insight as well as to when did you start to really be able to rely on those voices that you were hearing? And we'll address dreaming in another answer, but I'd love it if you could tell us when you could rely, as well as give us some of the examples of communicating with your family.
Yeah, so this is kind of a complex answer because there's so much to it, right? I mean,
there's a ton.
I was prophetic dreaming by the age of 3. And I do think that it was my early near-death experiences, at 1 and 3, that opened my channel up. I don't think it's an accident. I think everything happens perfectly, divinely timed. And I think, I honestly, I feel like I need to move into the prophetic dreaming for a second. We could talk.
Yeah, go there. If it's important to answer the other stuff, do it first. Yeah.
So with my mom was an amazing person. And when she died, and I'm going to give this, and it's, some people may like this, whoa, that's way out there. But the reality is, when she died, I was 15 and I was driving home with my grandpa. And I remember looking out the window and I see a spaceship come straight eye level to me. And my head's just looking out the window and I'm not batting an eye. Something is just like so intuitively ingrained that's like, okay. And I hear my mom and she says, I'm home. I'm okay. And you're going to be taken care of. And I was like, okay. And then all of a sudden it shoots off to the left and I'm able to follow it with precision and it's moving like nothing you'd ever see. Right. And then it shoots up really fast and then it comes back down right to eye level. And she says, I love you. And then that thing just takes off. Like it just shoots off into the sky. And, a lot of things I could say like, oh, well, you were 15, like maybe you were just emotionally. And for a while, I was like, okay, maybe that was just something I was like imagining. But then later on in life, it came back around. And so that moment, after she died, she would tap into my dream world. There are differences between visitations and dreams. And in visitations, your family members can come through and they typically have a sign that they're coming through. Like for myself, it's a knock on the door. If anyone comes through, they're always knocking on the door to let me know that they're coming in. And my mom would come through and she would talk to me about things going on in my life. She was a guide. She was actually guiding me through being a teenager because I barely graduated high school. I was smoking weed. I was drinking. I was in bars by the age of 17. My dad was an alcoholic and he didn't pay attention to anything. So he had no idea. But my mom would tell me like certain things that were going on and she would coach me by pulling me up a mountain with my favorite candy. Right. So I loved Starburst when I was a kid. And her way of getting me to keep going is she would walk me up this mountain and she'd be giving me candy along the ways. And she'd be like, this person in your life is not good for you. And you need to be careful. And she would warn me about events that would come up. And so while I may have seemed alone as a teenager in this reality, my mom was still there guiding me. And later when my grandpa actually died, I found out that they're both soul family. So we have, certain connections that are just like really deeply connected. And when my grandpa died, she came through. She's like, I just want to let you know that he's home, he's safe, he just needs time to rest, and then he'll contact you. And I was just like, great, beautiful, thank you for letting me know. And fast forward to one of my near-death experiences, I want to wrap this up because the spaceship thing came full circle. And all of a sudden, they take me up and they're doing a healing on me, and they're using this green energetic light, and they're working on my body. And I turn and I ask these beings, and I say, I can see Earth from the distance. And I said, that's what Earth looks like? And they're like, yeah. And it looked really brown and dingy and really sick. And they said, that's why you're there. And I said, does that mean that I have to go back? And they said, yes, you have to go back. And it's like, okay. And no big deal. But that was what I saw my mom show up in. I was seeing out the window was exactly where I got to go on my near-death experience. And so there's so much around that, right? But I've also been able to tap into my dreams as far as even just the other day, we had a tornado watch here. And it could be something as simple as I was watching a tornado in the distance in my dream. And the next day we had a tornado watch, and it was just a watch. So I was watching it in the distance. And so they were showing me like, hey, there's going to be a tornado watch. Simple things like that. Or I can know when an accident's going to happen, what color the car is, the intersection. When I had a partner cheating on me when I was much younger, they showed me the address and the name of the person, which really shook the person that I was dating, because they're like, how did you know? Like, how did you know that? Right. And so it's simple things, and it's profound things, and it doesn't shock me. It's nothing surprising. It's not like this big, like mind-blowing thing for me. It just is. This is how I've been my whole life. Right. And so there's just so much that goes into it, but it's been that way. And I tap into it. And if my intuition says something's off, I trust it and I listen to it. I will not go into a building if something says like, hey, don't go. Right. And there's just all these different components to it. So,
yeah, it sounds like a lot of your dreams were also very literal. Like what you dreamed was almost exactly what was happening in the external world, right? Mm-hmm. And for you to be able to even utilize like your mom as a guide, I think I'd shared with you when you and I briefly had talked that one of my coaches, one of my mentors, and one of my dearest relationships today is she's somebody who ran the School of Metaphysics for about 30 years. And she is one of the world-renowned dream interpretation experts. She's got a book that's called The Dreamer's Diary. And so a lot of what she talks about as well, and it's similar to even listening to you, but she talks a lot about the interpretation and the symbolism of different elements within dreams. Like, for example, anything that's a vehicle is representative of my body, right? My wife, because she's my partner, my lover, my actual partner in life, represents my subconscious mind talking to me within my dreams, right? There's different levels of interpretation. Whereas for you, it sounds like they're very literal. I don't like to ask yes or no questions, but I'd like to understand, like, what's the ratio, I guess, of like literal type dreams versus ones that you have to interpret and decipher? And how did you start to be able to interpret and understand your dream language?
Well, so that's the beauty of it, right? Like I do have to play is this literal, or is this telling me that I need to pay attention to something internal, right? Because yes, like when I have a dream about a tire, I either have to be like, oh shit, am I going to get a hole in my tire? Or do I need to check on my right leg? Or, and so I have to play that. And like, I got a nail in my tire the other day. And I know that a few days before that, I had a dream about the tire, but I didn't analyze it. So I wasn't sure, like, okay. But I did have the feeling that morning. I was like, I feel like something's going to happen with my tire. And sure enough, like that day I found a nail in my tire, and I was like, okay, like I know because of a feeling in my body. So when I wake up from a dream, if it's literal, it's almost like this, oh shit, be prepared for this kind of feeling. Or if it's a good feeling, it's like, okay, like, are you ready? Like, are you ready to embrace this? I mean, and that's happened. It's like, I'm not political by any means, but one of the last political elections, I woke up in the middle of the night and I was like, oh crap, this person just won. And that was all. Like, I just knew it. And I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't watch the news or anything. I just had this feeling in my body that it wasn't a good thing. And that's it. And then I was like, okay, yep, it happened. It did, but it's a sensation. And I think our bodies are tools. They're always talking to us. And when we learn that feeling, we know when something is good for us or not. Right. And we know when to like, something's off. Should we pay attention to this? But we ignore it. But I can't ignore it. Like it's like an anxiety that comes up like nothing. And I don't get anxious for just nothing.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much, it's like, okay, this dream is not just like, hey, pay attention to your body or XYZ. This is actually going to happen. So you need to really be like, and the beauty of it is I'm not shown things unless they're meant to be changed. Right. So it's almost like a warning system. And I think a lot of us have access to it. And it's more like a warning system of, hey, you have the chance to avoid this road closure, right? Yeah. You have the chance to avoid this traffic, whatever it is. I'm using simple examples, but I don't think we're shown anything that we're not meant to shift. Yep. Maybe it's a past life thing that we're actually supposed to skip this time. Who knows? But it's just a navigation system.
Mm-hmm. I very much appreciate that. I do believe that the body always points us towards what's important if we're paying attention, right? And then not everybody knows how to actually pay attention or how to interpret or what it's actually pointing us towards. And that goes back to what we were suggesting earlier, which is just this is a constant level of curiosity, wonder, and raising our level of consciousness and awareness to better understand ourselves so we can be intentional. I love that yours are very literal or sometimes need interpretation, that you even learned how to use your body to cue into that type of language and how to utilize it. It's interesting. And again, this interview is about you, but it's an interesting concept and topic for me because there were lots of years that I would tell you that I don't ever remember having dreams. And it's something that I'm working on currently, which is to be able to allow more flow of dreams and continue to better understand them and interpret them. And what was explained to me, again, by this mentor, at least in my situation, is she said that so often, because of how I live my life, she says that I'm a very active lucid dreamer. And there's a lot of things that my subconscious mind may normally communicate to me in my sleep that I'm actually getting communication during the day. I'm really fascinated to understand with your knowledge and understanding of dream work, like where does lucid dreaming versus prophetic dreaming versus nighttime dreaming versus however this looks show up for you and for other people? How do you teach them to tune into what is happening for them?
So multifaceted question. And the beauty is lucid dreaming is amazing. And I love when I drop into that space, and I can if I listen to the right music. So if we think about dreams in the forms of vibrations, right? If we're listening to the right vibrations before we go to sleep, that's really going to help us tap in. But we also have to look at what are we eating before bed? How late are we eating before bed? What are our daily habits that are going to put us into a specific sleep? A lot of people think of the dream world is not even black and white as how scientists see it, right? They say like, oh, if you're in REM, you're not going to dream certain things and all of these different components. But the reality is the deeper I sleep, the deeper my dreams are. And that's not for everyone. A lot of people don't. They think of dreams as, oh, well, you're not in that rested space. But that's not true. And so there's so many things. It's like nothing is black and white and everyone's going to have different experiences. But we could look at like, if you want to lucid dream, you need to make sure that you have not eaten too close before bed. You need to make sure that you're in a dark room, that there's nothing that's going to disturb you, and a certain vibrational pattern. There's so many binaural beats on YouTube that you can use. That's going to set the tone for you. And even reading about dreams before you go to bed can actually help you. So Robert Moss, I don't know if you've ever read any of Robert. Oh, so he has a bunch of books about going into lucid dreaming, and he set it up to where even just reading about it right before you go to bed can kick you into lucid dreaming. It's amazing. And so there's all these different components that go into it, but the reality is your health and your well-being and your lifestyle is going to dictate how you dream. And I think a lot of people think like, oh, I'm just not a dreamer. But if you pull away certain foods that are actually creating a lot of inflammation in their body, you pull those out and they no longer have that inflammation and they're going into a different level of sleep. All of a sudden they're dreaming and you're like, oh, Like, I didn't know this was possible. Right.
Yeah.
So there's so many things that go into it.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's been interesting for me because they're starting to come back in like a flurry. I had a deviated septum repair in December, and I didn't realize how little I was breathing and how much I was mouth breathing and how much interrupted sleep I was having. And I knew about all my physical pain and different pieces like that. And that was really the focus until I didn't have pain anymore, right? I've been a year and 2 months without any physical pain after 31 years of daily pain. So it's interesting because now I'm like learning to be able to put myself back into that space and continue to kind of go down this path of better understanding myself, even utilizing my messages from my subconscious mind that I receive when I'm sleeping, which I think are really beautiful. Just one real quick point here that I want to make, because I love that you wrote this down on the intake form and it's connected directly to what we're talking about. So this is just going to be a little fun moment, but you said that you dreamt of the last 2 tsunamis in Japan the night before that they happened. And then you wrote down the bigger question, which was funny. I didn't read the second line of this. I just, in my head, went immediately there. And I was like, okay, well, then the better question is it, did you see them or did you create them? Right. And that was the exact question that you just wrote, was like, am I manifesting it or am I just channeling and understanding what's about to happen? Yes. Where do you believe that to fall for you more often than not? Is it a projection and a vision, or do you believe you're manifesting it?
Well, so that's the thing, right? Like that just gave me chills again, because it's one of the big questions that I'm always asking. And it's just like this, we create our own realities, right? This is what we're told. And there is so much to it that, yes, I feel that is true. But there's also this that I do know that I've had these like visions beforehand of things that were happening. So maybe they're just like little warning systems, but I'm not going to Japan the next day, and I can't call Japan and be like, hey, Japan, you're going to have a tsunami tomorrow.
Hey, Japan.
So it's like, it's just this big question of, I don't know, because I am a very stoic person too. I believe in acceptance of our reality, but I also believe that we create our own reality by the steps we take. And so were my emotions so big that I dreamt about these tsunamis, and then all of a sudden, boom, there they are. Because I'm a really powerful person. Like, things that I have done in this life and gotten myself into just by existing, like, I know that I've created some really insane things, but am I that powerful? I mean, it's like I have absolutely no idea. And it's fun to think about, and it's such a curious question.
Yeah. Yeah, I often love to be able to contemplate perspective, right? Like, what is possible? What could be possible? Do we really even know what's real, right? Like, all of this stuff, it's just, we don't know, right? And so it's like, we just try to put ourselves in as much of a present moment as we can. I have to know, because knowing you and knowing how intentional you are, I have to believe that every bit of ink on your body is also intentional.
Yes.
And so if you're willing to go there, in fact, I don't know if I've ever asked anybody on this show ever about their tattoos, but for whatever reason, I'm being called to ask you. It's been like, it's come into my mind like multiple times, and I'm just now trusting it. So could you give us a little rundown?
That's actually hilarious, because I have Japanese waves on my arm.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it's the yin yang with the Japanese waves around it. So the water, the fire, the merging of energies. And so that's actually really funny to think about those two together.
Right. Right after we were talking about the tsunamis in Japan completely. Oh my goodness.
Did I start that by creating this first? And
yeah. Yeah.
And then the snake on my arm was one of my very first tattoos. It's almost 20 years old. And it's been one of my strongest animal totems in this life. And when I dream about it, depending on what it does, whether it bites me or if it's cuddling with me, it's a very strong indicator of what's about to happen in my life. Like, hey, something beautiful is about to come in, or hey, watch out for this, whatever it is, it'll try to bite me. And it's always been one of my strongest totems. So those are two. And then I have, stuff all over my stomach, and well, you
don't have to give us the rundown of all of them. What is the most meaningful tattoo that you have on your body? Whether you show us or just tell us about it, I don't care. It's up to you.
I would say, oh man. I mean, I did get one for my mom where it's a whole piece, and it's a sun and moon together, and it's shining over Buddha, who's in meditation position, who is over an angel crying on a cross. And so it was just kind of like this memory for my mom of this beautiful being who she found comfort in different religions. She was never like this rigid person. And so I kind of incorporated these different, like the cross, the angel, a Buddha, the sun, the moon, and just really incorporating it into this beautiful prayer for her.
I love that. Yeah, all my ink is intentional as well. And it's, I often say today that my scars are the stories that were chosen for me, and my tattoos are the stories I chose for myself, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And those scars for me are visible, but they aren't always visible, right? There's a lot of our scars that are hidden, and we need to get to understand them better. I love even how you honored your mom with the multiple religions. I often say, don't let the language get in the way of the lesson. And what I mean by that is, like, whether we call them God, Allah, the universe, the source, whatever, that's where I've come to in all of my study. And all of what I believe is that I think that all religion, and this is going to not land for some people, but I think all religion is ultimately a man-made construct of the same thing interpreted through multiple different channels, right? And if we actually look at a lot of it, the same principles, the same beliefs, the same elements of what we're tapping into are the same, just communicated differently to be accessible by different cultures of people who have different slight belief systems. So I love that your mom was already there.
Oh yeah. And no, I mean, I always talk about that, where it's one of the things for me where if you look at every single religion and you pull from everything has truth in it, right? We can find truth in every single teaching. And if we bring those together, you have a beautiful culmination of teachings, right? And it's just like, I think that's what we're supposed to be doing, is seeing what is the beauty that everyone is teaching and bringing that together and living from that space. And so, yeah, I think it's all connected.
You do a lot of work in the holistic health field, right? You clearly have had to embrace it for yourself through a whole variety of ways, internally, externally, you name it. You've been there, you've done it, you've explored it, you've learned it, you're doing it, and you still are on a daily basis. Often you're helping people really step into their own level of health, their own relationship with health, their own ability to actually integrate it effectively in their lives. And you're often helping people who are in situations where maybe they've not been able to integrate health effectively, or they've had a lot of failure, a lot of breakdowns. What do you believe are some of the biggest blockers to holistic health and the creators of what we call chronic health conditions? And how have you found your work to be able to get people on the right path?
So that's a funny question, because I no longer do one-on-ones for the reason that I think the reason that a lot of people find resistance in it, if you will, is because they don't take responsibility for their own health, and they're not willing to do the things that it takes to actually live a healthy life. And I got sick of people making excuses. And it's one of those things. And you caring
more than they did.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, don't pay me thousands of dollars to help you if you're not going to actually take the steps to get better, because it's really not that complex. Your lifestyle dictates a lot of how you're going to feel, and what you eat, who you're hanging out with, and all of these different components are really not actually that difficult. The thing is, we live in a world where a lot of people follow, and they put trust where people say to put trust. They find a Western doctor. The doctor says, oh, well, there's nothing we can do about it. And so they think, oh, okay, there's nothing I can do about it. Let me just take this medication, and I'll just continue taking this medication. And they don't stop and think for themselves. They don't ask for second opinions. And so I really just reached the point where I realized humans have to learn to take their health into their own hands if they ever actually want to get better. And a lot of people don't actually want to get better. They just want to keep doing the same things that feels comfortable, because it is. I've been in that discomfort. I know what it feels like to feel abandoned and to live in that neglect and to live in that pain and fear and to want to stay there, because it is scary to step outside of, well, what if I actually get better? Right? Like, that's going to be a whole new world. Like, I was terrified of that. Right? And so I think at this point, what I teach is, this is what our lifestyle is. The reasons we tend to get sick are insulin resistance is one of the top reasons, and nutrient deficiencies and fungal infections in general. And a lot of people are not going to take care of this by living the same lifestyle that they continue to do, or going and getting more antibiotics or medications. And so it's going to keep perpetuating their illness. And so I teach people, these are the things that you can do. And I'm making videos for people to where they have this information, where they don't have to go and pay thousands of dollars to get better. I show people like there are very simple reasons why so many of us are sick, and it doesn't take much. You just have to have the wherewithal, and you have to be willing to take the steps to move in a different direction. Everything takes time. We have to give ourselves space to get there. It took me years and years and years to reach a point where I was willing to change certain things that were actually benefiting me, that I didn't think I was too off, the beaten path with. But I realized like, oh, I have to be more self-dedicated to XYZ. I have to put this first. And when you put yourself first, there's no more excuses. It's like your friend saying, hey, you want to go get drunk tomorrow? You're actually going to take a step and like, is that going to move me in the right direction? No. Okay. No, I think I'm going to go do something different. Right. It's just about taking those steps forward. That's always asking, is this going to get me closer to who I want to be or further away from it? And so where I'm at with it right now is just, here are the steps. It is up to you. I'm no longer going to walk you through it. It's up to you to take your health into your own hands and stop listening to a Western medical system that is broken and is keeping you sick.
Yeah. I'm a big believer in the integration of both Western and Eastern medicine, right? It's something that I do think that it's a very holistic approach. I love the fact that you're even in holistic medicine. And I also can appreciate wanting to go away from working one-to-one. I know that in our world, we've expanded and do a lot less one-to-one than we ever did. We do a lot of one-to-many in a variety of ways because there's also power in kind of community and connection and different abilities to have things actually move forward. I would love to come back to a different topic that we were talking about early on. I do believe that love is one of the most pure and one of the most powerful energies and emotions that can exist. I think can overtake a lot of negative emotion. And you were on a journey of going from a place of being afraid of love, being loved, loving, and just the entire topic of love, to having learned to love yourself and start to express your love to others. Where do you reside today in this journey of love, and what are you hoping or desiring will continue to develop for you as it relates to deeper understandings and connections through love?
So that's a powerful question, because the reality is I have chronic PTSD. So I still fear that sensation of feeling good. Right. And so it doesn't mean that I don't do it. It's feel the fear and do it anyways with everything I do in life. Everything I do in life, I'm always like one step ahead of like, oh, well, this could happen, because I'm so used to certain things going one way. Right. Like literally one thing after another for 30 plus years. And so I still have that in my head, but I know the beauty that can happen too. And so even with my dog, I have a dog who is my soulmate, and I love that dog to pieces, and she's 10 years old. And I still go into moments where I'm like, oh my God, I love her so much that I know it's going to hurt so bad when she dies. And I'm very aware of that. And it's kind of the same with people, where I have tried dating a couple times in the last 7 years. And I realized I'm not putting myself in situations with anyone that I could actually fall in love with, because I was still working through this wound of, if I actually love someone, it's going to hurt that much more when it ends, whether that's in a year or 50 years. Right. And I'm aware of it though. And I know that I'm capable of that kind of love. And I know that I deserve that kind of love, because I brought that on myself. I grew into the being that I want to be. Therefore, I can attract someone that matches that. Right. I don't expect people to be better than me. I don't expect them to be, I expect them to match my vibration, because that is who I am. And so I feel that it's beautiful, and I love being alone, and I could remain being alone if that's what was in my best interest. But I do know that that's not my life path. I am meant to come into union. I am meant to do bigger things with somebody. And that is, love is allowing that person in, knowing that I'm going to have moments of pain and I'm going to freak out, and I might have to go into a room and sit and breathe for a minute, because I feel so much, and I feel the pain that happened in the past. And no matter how much I've worked through it and understand it, it's still going to be present. And it may be 20 years later where I still have this moment of, oh my God, like I know that I can lose my partner at any second, because I know that all of my family, except for one person, died before they were 50s, right? And so it's like this moment of, you never know when you're going to lose someone. And so you have to ask yourself, are you loving the best that you can? Are you loving as deeply as you can? And what does that mean? Do you love yourself deep enough to love someone how they actually deserve to be loved? Right? Because I think you can only meet someone as deeply as you meet yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, they don't know themselves that well. And so I think that love is really superficial when we look at it from a deeper perspective. And there are very few people in this world who are actually in relationships that are built on genuine love, of mutual understanding, mutual respect, and love just to love each other. Not love because you can give me XYZ and vice versa, but genuine, just like I see you, you see me, we're two separate people. Let's do this together.
Yeah.
You know, and that's where I'm at. And will I? Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't ask that question with any judgment or criticism or shame connected to it. I think everybody's path is different.
Mm-hmm.
I love how you answered the question though, and how you even brought it full circle. You know, my wife and I've said for a long time that love is as much a feeling as it is a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And it is. It's rooted in trust. It's rooted in respect. It's rooted in a variety of things that are not contingent upon what someone does for you, but who they are. Right. And really being able to learn at the core of who they are, how to support them, their deficiencies, their gifts, their all of the above. You know, when my wife and I were in our 14-year window where I like to say we were hiding from each other, it was unconsciously hiding from each other. Right. What we both wanted was deeper connection, but we weren't allowing ourselves to open to what was possible. And there was still a very much like, what's in it for me and who's going to be right mentality that existed for both of us, even though we weren't conscious of that, right? It was self-protectionary. It existed. And it was only when we got to a place where we realized, like, you know, we don't want to lose what we have in front of us, but we were also prepared to lose it, that the real work began to unpack and uncover what we believe love is today, which is far beyond just a feeling and what it is for Valentine's Day, right?
Yeah. And you know, the beauty of that right there is because you took responsibility for yourself and she herself as well, right? It wasn't pointing fingers. It wasn't you saying like, oh, well, you're not doing this right. And that is where growth can happen, is when you're looking inside and realizing that everything you're doing internally is what you are expressing outwardly.
Yeah, that there's congruence between intent and actual actions and how they're being received. Because that's where the disconnect and resistance comes from for most people, is when there's a misalignment in either intellectual and emotional beliefs or between my intent and how my actions are actually being delivered and received, right? That's where the divide and the disconnect comes from. I really appreciate the way that you are able to sit here and say, I know I deserve these things. I know that I'm capable of these things. I know all of this, right? And that's what I like to call that kind of intellectual and emotional dance, right? Because you've got that cellular memory and activation that in that moment of trigger, or that moment of feeling like you're going to be abandoned, that moment of loss, all the shit floods, right? And yet you can still know something to be completely true. We teach and guide people through processes of being able to shorten that time frame, to get in our bodies quicker, to be able to separate in those moments and actually move forward with what's real based on what we know. How are you doing that? How have you learned to do that? Because your awareness and understanding of self is so high, but yet, like every other human, you have these moments that you get hit and you have to move through it. So what does that look like for you?
I mean, it just happened today. And it's kind of funny because it was, for me, like, it's like the simple things now that trigger me, right? Someone could tell me like something about their, you know, family members dying or something, and I could see the bigger picture right away. Doesn't faze me. But today, so I'm a photographer, and I'm learning, I'm learning new video techniques. And my ego got so shook that I wanted to cry because I didn't know how to do something. And I'm such a, I'm the pro and the expert in functional medicine, right? So people look to me for answers in there. And here I am, like, wanting to scream at this guy for giving me feedback. And he did it so beautifully too. Like, mind you, he's like, cool. He's like, maybe we could do a different transition from here to here. And my body just went into like, don't tell me what to do, you know?
Yeah.
And so, and I sat there and I was like, Lynn, I was like, your ego is on fire right now. Like, this is just a learning experience. It's okay. But it's also okay. If you need to cry, go cry, you know? And so I did, like, I actually had to cry in that moment just because of the overwhelm of sensation in my body. Like if I didn't let that out, I felt like I was going to explode.
Yeah.
So I allowed myself to cry, but then I laughed because I was just like, it's so funny to witness yourself in these moments that they don't matter. Honestly, nothing really matters in this life. Like it's simulation and everything we do is just so, it really doesn't make that big of a difference.
Yeah.
And I'm getting worked up here over this video and I'm just like, okay. I was like, this is a learning experience, Len. You get to become a better videographer. Like, this is fantastic. He's helping you. But man, just seeing my ego on fire, like I just had to sit there and feel the fire in my body and the anger. And it's just like, oh man, like, okay, like this is great. Now let's move through it. Because if you don't move through it, if you don't own yourself, it's going to own you. And it's going to continue. It's going to just perpetuate more and more situations that are going to keep feeding you that, right? And I think that's where the acceptance piece comes in, where I get the whole manifestation thing. You want to manifest a great life. You want to manifest this much money, XYZ, fine. But you have to know where you are and how you're feeling with where you are in the moment first. Like there is no moving forward unless you accept the actions that you're doing and why they're happening and the feelings in your body. And so every time that I get road rage, like if someone's in the left lane and they're driving slow, I have to sit with myself and be like, okay, then, like, does this really matter at this point? Because I will flip off and I will be a jerk to whoever's driving slow in the left lane. And so there are these moments where I have to check in and be like, all right, Lynn, like you're on fire. It's really no big deal. Don't let this person get to you. Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm always doing that. I'm always checking in with that.
Yeah. I have to put my wife on blast here for just a second because there's something, and it just came up this last weekend, and she's like, "Are you ever going to let this go?" And I'm not. I'm never going to let it go. She has road rage herself, and maybe 15 years ago or something, there was a situation. It was around the holidays, and she got so angry and she flipped off a Santa Claus. While she was driving. And so I keep telling him, like, I always warn our kids, I'm like, guys, be careful. Like mom flipped off Santa Claus one time when she was driving. And yet that is real. Now I also really identify. And so to alleviate, the elements of the ego that you felt, I identify with that. A lot of people are like, Brian, like you teach people these things, like you work through these things. Like, what does this look like? Where do you still get triggered? And what's interesting is like, I'm human and yes, I still get triggered in moments, right? It doesn't happen nearly as often as it used to. Many of the things that used to trigger me don't anymore. Right. And even when they do, I can move through them in minutes and moments, but it's the seemingly meaningless shit that drives me the most crazy. And it's almost always connected to technology. Yep. So I totally identify what you were talking about, but I have to call it full circle because again, the fact that you went there with that answer with your photography, it's real time. This is the first podcast that I've been on, my own, where I actually have real professional grade audio equipment. I was using a whole bunch of different things. So this is the first time that this setup exists. And it happened as a direct result of 2 in-person podcast swaps that we did in my studio, where my recording and interview of them was flawless. But all the files on both of theirs, when they interviewed me using my studio, my technology, one of them had a software glitch that we lost one of the angles at 26 minutes in, all the audio gone. And the other one had such unusable audio that I literally last week was in the state that you were describing, like totally up here, had to go deep on research, ego getting in the way. And I ultimately just reached out to both of them and I owned it. It's like, guys, I'm embarrassed. I'm operating from a place of shame right now, which I don't do often anymore, but I have to tell you, I take a lot of pride in my equipment and what we do. And the fact that you guys invested the time to come to my studio and this was what I was able to give you back. That's not the standard that I desire for myself and the people that I'm working with. So I ripped everything apart and I rebuilt it last week. Today's the first day that I'm using it and it's flawless so far, but I totally get it. And I was like, up here last week, I had to be really careful with my wife, with my kids, with every interaction, because I was just like this. And I was fried by technology, even though I seemingly can have endless patience for people. It's an interesting thing because technology also puts off energy, frequency, and vibration.
Exactly.
And so that's what I'd like to understand. Since you're such an energetic creature, how do you identify the energy that's yours, the energy that's not yours, whether it's from a person or from some technology or environment?
Okay, so that's a beautiful question. And one, to start with the technology, if things aren't going well technically, that's usually my cue, like, okay, step away from the computer, like go do something different. It's not time to do this right now. And I think that's actually why our conversation got put off, because I think now was the perfect time to do this. Right. And so I do that. And I think that my energy also affects the technology that's in front of me too.
Likewise, I agree.
If I'm in a bad mood, sure enough, the technology is going to be way off and I get even more irritable. And then I'm just like, this, man, I got to get out of here. Right. But then so the point with other people, I was extremely empathic very early on in life. And I actually remember this one instance where I realized how deeply ingrained it was. There was an accident at this intersection in San Diego when I was many, many years ago. And I got out and I pulled the woman out of her car and I took her to sit on the side of the curb. And when I was walking her and she was crying and, bleeding, I could feel her energy and I started sobbing her sobs. Like it wasn't my voice, it was hers. I wasn't crying, but I was making the sounds that she was. And I was like, oh my God, like this is way more intense than I thought. And I need to get a hold of this. So that I shifted in that moment and I like pushed my energy out. So then she became more calm and I was able to calm her down instead of take on hers. And that was the moment for me, one, understanding my power in a whole nother way. Like my energy really affects people. And two, it was just like, I need to make sure I pay attention to who's in my environment. And to give like an even bigger perspective is I went on a date and I remember someone like laying on me and just being like, oh my God, like your energy feels so good. And I felt sapped. Like I swear to God, this person was sapping my energy in that moment. And I was just like, oh, it's like, I don't have I'm not using my intuition. I should have said like, okay, I'm done. Like, I don't want to be at this place. We were at like a store or something. And I was like, I need to go. But it's really about knowing how you feel when you're alone. And I think it comes back to that. You need to know what it feels like to be alone and happy in your own space. So that is your, what do you call that, navigation system, right? It's your compass to know, like, when someone makes you feel better, you keep moving that direction. If they make you feel worse, you move back into your space and you say, sorry, I got to go. And I have very few people in my life for that reason, because there are very few people who I've met who match me and who like complete, like our circle is like a complete circle, not this like back and forth. It's just a beautiful, easy connection that we're always meeting each other and always assisting each other in really healthy ways. And so I had to do that though, because people drained me left and right because I am extremely knowledgeable in so many ways that everyone was trying to get something from me. And I eventually was like, no more, like, I can't do this. And that's when I learned, like, this is my neutral and I only allow people in who are going to take me forward. Yeah. And so I think that's the key, is knowing yourself and feeling who you are by yourself.
Yeah. I think that's so critical. And I think, I love how you answered that question, how you navigated that question, how you gave examples and situations. This is one of the things that I find so often for people in particular who may not have identified as an empath, but absorb energy. We all absorb energy. Some just more are sensitive to it than others. And the way that you even talked about that, right? It's, again, even the people wanting something from you versus for you, right? The additive versus taking away. These are just really simple things that we can use to kind of bring ourselves back to center and really pay attention, again, utilizing our body, which is, I think, the greatest tuning fork ever made in this world, is our ability to actually see these things and trust them. You are a badass, Linn, and I am so grateful that we've had this conversation today. I would love it if you could give a little insight into how people can find you, how they can follow you. I know that you guys have a relaunch for a course that has given people access to some of the tools that you referenced earlier. So make sure to integrate that in there. And then I'll probably have one more question for you before we wrap.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question, because the course that I was creating, has been a lot of technical glitches. And so I'm actually sitting with that right now and figuring out how it's going to move forward and what it's going to look like. And actually might just do free videos on YouTube instead, because I believe that people should have this information as elementary. We should know how to take care of our bodies from day one, and we don't. And so I'm starting to think maybe this is just something that I need to give people information of in simple ways, because it's really not complex. And so that's being navigated right now. But in the, interim, you can find me on linnrivers.com. It's LINN rivers.com. And if there's anything you want to talk about, there's a bunch of different options that are still on there while I figure out what's going to happen.
Alrighty. Well, on another note, I'm happy to be a sounding board for you in thinking through even some of the best ways to put that stuff out into the world to create some more impact. What I know is that the world needs more of you. They need more access to you, but not in a way that's energetically draining for you, just in a way that's going to be additive in terms of the information and wisdom we can glean through you. Mm-hmm. As we wrap this, I have not asked this to everybody, but I've done this a number of times on this show, and I'm feeling called to do it with you. So I'm going to say, Linn, I give you the floor. What would be a closing thought that you would like to leave our audience or the world with?
I think it's important to invest in yourself, and that's time, energy, money. It's really important that you become the best version of who you are. Your purpose in life is not to be a doctor or a lawyer or anything of that. It's to become a better version of yourself. And so the more time that you can invest in things that you love, becoming better or whatever it is, right? If climbing or paddleboarding, those are things that I love doing. And so I make sure that I do them, and things that just make you feel good. I think it's important to spend money on things that are going to better you as a person, and to really just shift your mindset around everything that you do, and to ask yourself again, is this going to bring me closer to the goals, or is it going to take me further away from them? And to just remember that you have to live with yourself the rest of your life. Undoubtedly, other people may come and go, but you're going to have to answer to yourself every single day of this life. And so are you enjoying who you're becoming, or are you getting worse at certain things, or, just who are you becoming? And one of the biggest questions I like to ask people is, 5 years from now, if you are in the same situation, the same health, are you going to be happy, or is that going to be a really bad picture to look at? And if that's the case, you need to start making changes now, because what you do now is going to dictate your future. And I'm going to throw this in there because it was one of my profound moments that I loved when I lived in Austin a long time ago, which I'm back in Austin now, and I'm so happy about it. I was riding my bike and I got this download about the present moment and what it actually meant. The present moment is a present moment. Everything that we do in this moment is creating our reality in the future. So if I'm doing something now, that means that 5 years down the road, if I'm continuing on that trajectory, that's going to become my reality. And so that is mindfulness in the best way that I could ever describe of, are you being mindful about your actions and how they're actually going to impact your life? And that's honestly the best thing that I can remind people to look at.
Dude, you rock. I'm so happy that the universe conspired otherwise, and that we got to do this today, even though we thought it might not happen today in the very beginning. And so it was meant to be. And I'm really grateful that you were with us today, my friend.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy that I got to be here with you.
Yeah. And for those of you that just watched Linn flip open her lid and jump in, remind yourself that even in a life where you may fear love, you've been disconnected from love. If you learn to listen to yourself, if you learn to be okay being alone, and you really understand what your body is pointing you towards, you can actually escape a lot of the things that have kept you stuck. Remind yourself that you are the one who has to live with you for the rest of your life. And are things actually getting you closer to who you want to be and what you want to accomplish, or further away? The simple reminders that came from Linn's life, her love, her wisdom, are ones that you can integrate in your life today, but it will require you to flip open your lid and scan your can.
What you can probably tell by now is that I love telling these stories, but what I love even more is the impact that's coming from them. You see, we're on a mission to impact over 1 billion lives as quickly as possible, but to do that, we need you. See, we believe that moved people move people. And so all I'm asking is, if you've resonated, connected with any of the messaging, please consider commenting, sharing, leave a rating and review. Thank you so much for tuning into Flipping the Lid. And if you want more information on the show, how to become a guest, how to recommend a guest, or any of the other details, head over to flippingthelid.com. We'll see you there.